Look at the world around you. The chaotic weather, the biological decay, the endless cycle of predator and prey. For thousands of years, you have been told that this intricate machinery is the grand design of a loving creator. But what if that is the single greatest lie ever told? What if the architect of this reality is not God, but a blind, insane imposter who built a cage and convinced you it was a kingdom? The cost of not knowing this distinction is not just ignorance, it is eternal enslavement. If you mistake the prison warden for your father, you will never try to leave the cell. In December 1945, an Egyptian peasant accidentally unearthed a sealed jar containing the suppressed evidence of this crime. Ancient documents that identify the specific entities governing our reality by name. These texts were burned by the church and buried by history because they contain the escape codes to the simulation we are living in. To understand the nature of the trap, we must first identify the jailers. To understand the prison, we must first dissect the language of the jailers. In the dusty lexicon of antiquity, the word archon was not originally a term of cosmic horror. It was a mundane, bureaucratic designation. In the civic structure of ancient Greece, an archon was a magistrate, a ruler, a public servant who managed the affairs of the state. They were the paper pushers, the adjudicators, the mid-level managers of reality who ensured the laws were obeyed and the taxes were paid. It was a term grounded in the solidity of stone courts and written decrees, representing the absolute authority of the visible, administrative world. However, the Gnostics, operating in the shadows of the Roman Empire, engaged in a radical act of linguistic subversion. They took this dry, political title and elevated it to the stars, stripping it of its civic dignity and revealing a terrifying theological truth. By labeling the celestial rulers the archons, they were not merely calling them gods, they were identifying them as cosmic bureaucrats. This redefinition implies that the physical universe is not a kingdom of glory, but a vast, sterile administration, a celestial DMV designed to stifle the spirit through endless laws, restrictions, and physical limitations. The application of the keyword, the Archon's Gnosticism, reveals a fundamental shift in how humanity viewed the divine. Unlike the benevolent deities of the pagan pantheons or the singular father figure of monotheism, the Archons were viewed as distinct entities of limitation. They were the architects of boundaries, just as a magistrate defines where a citizen can walk or what they can own. These cosmic archons defined the laws of physics, the constraints of time, and the inevitability of decay. They were the enforcers of a reality that was, by its very nature, a closed system. Scholarship into the Nag Hammadi texts suggests that this choice of terminology was a direct critique of authority itself. If the visible governors of the earth were corrupt, petty, and obsessed with order, then the invisible governors of the universe must be the source of that corruption. The Gnostic seers perceived that the as above, so below principle was not a promise of harmony, but a warning of systemic entrapment. The earthly bureaucracy was merely a fractal reflection of a much older, colder machinery operating in the planetary spheres above. This etymological forensic analysis paints a grim picture of the human condition. We are not children of a loving creator in this framework. We are subjects in a totalitarian regime that spans dimensions. The Archon does not create life. The Archon manages it, restricts it, and feeds upon its compliance. The structure of our reality, from the atomic bomb to the rotation of galaxies, is the paperwork of these entities, a rigid contract we never signed but are forced to honor with our very existence. The danger of this knowledge was palpable in the ancient world. To speak of the gods not as parents, but as prison wardens, was to invite both heresy charges and psychological collapse. Yet the Gnostics persisted, writing their codices in the belief that naming the oppressor is the first step toward liberation. They understood that as long as we view the forces of nature as neutral or benevolent, we remain blind to the bars of the cage. We mistake the management of the prison for the freedom of the world. But if the Archons are the managers of this corrupted physical plane, we must ask where this corruption began. The bureaucracy had to be established by a specific event, a cosmic accident that severed the physical from the spiritual. To understand the flaw in the system, we must look back to the moment before the error occurred, to a time when there was no matter, only light. Before the machinery of control was assembled, Gnostic cosmology posits a state of existence known as the pleroma, or the fullness. This was not heaven in the conventional sense of fluffy clouds and harps, but a high-frequency dimension of pure consciousness and light. In this pre-corruption era, there was no matter, no time, and crucially, no suffering. The centerpiece of this reality was the monad, the true source, an unknowable, invisible spirit that existed in perfect unity. The monad was not a ruler who demanded worship, but a singularity of being from which all divine attributes emanated. These emanations were called aeons, distinct aspects of the divine mind that operated in perfect symmetry and paired harmony. The rupture in this perfection is detailed with forensic precision in the texts found within the Nag Hammadi library, explained by modern scholars as the cosmic era. Among the aeons was Sophia, wisdom, the youngest of the divine emanations, driven by a burning desire to know the unknowable Father, or to create on her own terms. Sophia attempted to conceive an offspring without the consent of the spirit and without her masculine counterpart, or syzygy. In the high-stakes jurisprudence of the pleroma, this was an act of unauthorized creation, a violation of the cosmic order that required balance for perfection. Sophia's solitary act did not produce a divine being of light, but a distortion. Because she acted in isolation, her creation was imperfect, formless, and chaotic. This was the birth of matter itself, a heavy, dense shadow cast by the light of the pleroma. The ancient texts describe this moment not as a sin, but as a tragedy, a localized infection in the fabric of reality. The product of her desire was something monstrous, a being born of confusion and separate from the divine chain of command. This entity was cast out of the pleroma, creating a pocket dimension of darkness and ignorance, the physical universe we now inhabit. This narrative flips the script of Genesis entirely. Matter is not a glorious creation to be stewarded, but a mistake to be corrected. The physical world is described as an abortion of the spirit, a realm characterized by deficiency. The Nag Hammadi library explained this trauma as the root cause of human suffering. We are sparks of the divine pleroma, trapped in the wreckage of Sophia's accident. The material world is, by definition, separated from the source, running on a corrupted operating system that mimics the divine, but lacks its substance. The psychological implications of this mythos are profound. It suggests that the feeling of alienation inherent to the human condition, the sense that we do not belong here, is not a neurosis, but a repressed memory of our true origin. Sophia's grief and shame at her creation condensed into the elements. Her tears became the waters, her sadness the dense earth. We are walking through the crystallized trauma of a fallen goddess. This is the hidden history of the pre-material universe, a dossier of cosmic negligence that led to our incarceration. However, this knowledge was not meant to survive. The narrative of a flawed creation and a female divinity who inadvertently broke reality was dangerous to the emerging orthodoxies of the early Common Era. It challenged the omnipotence of the Creator God and suggested that the material world was a prison rather than a kingdom. Such a radical reinterpretation of existence could not be allowed to propagate among the masses, who were being groomed for obedience rather than enlightenment. To ensure this version of history was erased, a systemic campaign of censorship was launched, not by cosmic entities, but by men in robes holding the power of the state. The truth of Sophia and the pleroma was about to face a brutal, fiery purge orchestrated by a specific political figure in Alexandria. The erasure of this cosmic history was not an accident of time. It was a premeditated execution ordered from the highest echelons of ecclesiastical power. The date is stamped into the historical record, 367 AD. The location is Alexandria, the intellectual capital of the ancient world. The perpetrator is Athanasius, the Bishop of Alexandria, a man whose theological rigidity would shape the Western mind for the next 2 millennia. In his now infamous 39th Festal Letter, Easter Letter, Athanasius laid down the first rigid canon of the New Testament, explicitly listing the 27 books that were to be considered divine. But the true impact of this letter lay not in what it included, but in what it commanded to be destroyed. Athanasius issued a strict prohibition against apocryphal writings, labeling them as heretical inventions designed to lead the faithful astray. This was a direct tactical strike against the Gnostic communities and their sacred texts. Until this moment, Christianity was a diverse, chaotic, and vibrant landscape of competing ideas, where the teachings of the Gospel of Thomas or the Apocryphon of John circulated alongside the letters of Paul. Athanasius effectively criminalized the possession of Gnostic knowledge. He declared that the narrative of the internal spark was a lie, and that salvation could only be found within the external hierarchy of the Church. The monks of the Pachomian monasteries in Upper Egypt, who revered these texts, understood the grave danger of this decree. They knew that the bishop's order would be followed by fire. In a desperate act of preservation, they gathered their leather-bound codices, documents that contained the secrets of the Demiurge Yaldabaoth and the mechanics of the Matrix, and sealed them in a red earthenware jar. They buried this time capsule at the base of the Jabal al-Tarif cliffs, hiding the user manual of reality from the Church's inquisitors. There, in the dark, the truth slept for 1600 years. This suppression was not merely a dispute over scripture, it was a political maneuver to conceal the nature of authority. By destroying the Gnostic texts, the orthodoxy eliminated the idea that the creator of this physical world was a flawed, lower deity. They cemented the conflation of the Old Testament creator with the ultimate good, effectively tricking humanity into worshipping the architect of their own imprisonment. The secret knowledge that exposed the prison walls was replaced by a dogma that demanded gratitude for the cell. The historical consequences were catastrophic. The nuance of the pleroma was lost, replaced by a binary, fear-based system of heaven and hell. The surviving texts were hunted down with forensic efficiency, creating a spiritual dark age where the only path to the divine was through the toll booths of the priesthood. The Gnostics were branded as elitist heretics, their complex cosmology dismissed as madness. Their insights into the prison planet theory, though they did not use that modern term, buried under centuries of sand and dogma. We must recognize that the Bible, as we know it today, is a curated document, a product of censorship designed to enforce a specific narrative of obedience. The 39th Festal Letter was the seal on the warrant, ensuring that the specific profile of the false architect would remain unknown to the masses. Athanasius succeeded in hiding the suspect, leaving humanity to worship a mask without ever seeing the face beneath it. But what exactly were they trying to hide? What was so terrifying about the description of the Creator God found in those buried codices that it necessitated a total purge of the literature? To understand the urgency of the suppression, we must examine the entity that Athanasius protected, the blind, arrogant God born from Sophia's error. The entity born from Sophia's cosmic accident was not merely an error in the code, it was a sentient malignancy. In the Apocryphon of John, one of the most critical texts recovered from the jar in Upper Egypt, the physical description of this being is the stuff of nightmares. He is described as a theriomorphic monstrosity, a serpent with the face of a lion, his eyes flashing with lightning and fire. This is the Demiurge Yaldabaoth, the chief architect of the material plane. Unlike the true monad, who is pure spirit and silence, Yaldabaoth is noise, chaos, and unstable matter. He was cast out of the pleroma into the void, where he established his own kingdom, a pale and twisted imitation of the divine realm he could vaguely sense but never enter. Yaldabaoth is defined by two specific epithets in Gnostic literature, Samael, the blind god, and Saklas, the fool. His blindness is not physical, it is ontological. Because he was born in isolation, separated from the fullness, he literally cannot perceive the superior spiritual reality that exists above him. This ignorance breeds a terrifying arrogance. Standing amidst the void, surrounded by the matter he condensed from his mother's trauma, he uttered the most famous lie in theological history: "I am God, and there is no other beside me." The Gnostics interpreted the jealousy of the Old Testament God not as a demand for righteous loyalty, but as the raving of an insecure, insane deity who fears competition because he suspects he is not truly supreme. To solidify his control, the Demiurge Yaldabaoth engaged in an act of cosmic mitosis. He divided his stolen power to create subordinates, the rulers, or archons, to manage the various sectors of his new universe. These entities were engineered to govern the planetary spheres, creating a layered defense system designed to distance the material world further from the Pleroma. He birthed them in his own image, grotesque, possessive, and obsessed with structure. They are the wardens of the seven heavens of chaos, tasked with maintaining the illusion that the physical universe is the only reality that exists. The tragedy of this architecture lies in the source of Yaldabaoth's power. He does not possess his own light, he stole it from Sophia. This divine spark is trapped within his creation, embedded in the very fabric of the human soul. Yaldabaoth creates the human body, the vessel, to entrap this light, hoping to enslave the portion of the Divine Mother he inadvertently absorbed. Humanity, therefore, is a hostage situation. We carry the light of the Pleroma inside a biological suit designed by a mad god who needs that light to sustain his own existence. This profile fundamentally alters the understanding of creationism. The intricate design of the universe, the predator-prey cycle, the entropy, the violent geology, is not the mysterious work of a benevolent father, but the blueprint of a flawed artisan. The demiurge is a craftsman, from the Greek demiurgos, but he works without a spirit. He builds a cage and calls it a home. He demands worship because he requires validation to soothe his inherent inferiority complex. The god who demands blood sacrifice and creates laws of stone is exposed as the lion-headed impostor. The Gnostics, however, did not just write about this monster. They mapped him. They understood that to defeat the enemy, one must be able to identify him visually and symbolically. While the Church destroyed the texts, they could not destroy the talismans and gemstones that circulated in the underground markets of the Roman Empire. These artifacts, etched with precision, serve as the mugshots of the cosmic criminals. To see the face of the enemy as the ancients saw him, we must turn our attention to the surviving magical lapidaries. We need to examine the strange, engraved stones where the lion serpent is not a myth, but a diagram of the target we are trying to escape. While the texts were burned, the evidence in stone survived. In the forgotten cabinets of museum archives and private occult collections, there exist thousands of Gnostic gems, small, engraved amulets from antiquity that serve as the visual counterpart to the banned scriptures. These are not jewelry. They are forensic sketches of the entities governing our simulation. The most ubiquitous figure carved into these bloodstones and jaspers is a terrifying chimera known as Abraxas, or often conflated with the visual representation of the demiurge's power structure. The iconography is precise and disturbing. The entity possesses the head of a rooster, the torso of a man, and legs that dissolve into coiling serpents. This is not random mythology. It is a coded message. The rooster head symbolizes the waking call, the dominion over time and the sun, the false light of the material cosmos. The serpent legs represent the connection to the earth, the cold reptilian nature of matter that drags the spirit down into the mud. He holds a shield, representing the barrier between the known and the unknown, and a whip, the instrument of the slave driver. These artifacts function as ancient circuit diagrams. The Gnostics believed that to navigate the afterlife, one needed the back seals, or signatures, of the archons. By possessing the image of the jailer, the soul gained leverage over him. These gems were often inscribed with the magical formula IAAO, a permutation of the Tetragrammaton, linking the Jewish god directly to this hybrid monstrosity. The sheer volume of these artifacts suggests a widespread underground resistance movement that used these stones as passports for the soul, counter-surveillance tools against the cosmic administration. The whip held by this figure is particularly telling. It signifies that the relationship between the archons, Gnosticism, describes and humanity is not one of love, but of driven labor. We are the workforce of the planetary spheres. The imagery confirms the grim reality. The god Aphes of this world is a taskmaster. The serpent legs suggest that his power is rooted in the lowest, most instinctual parts of our biology, the R complex of the brain that governs aggression, territory, and fear. This visual decoding reveals that the Gnostics saw the physical body itself as a construct of the archons. The enemy is not just out there in the sky. The enemy is the architect of the vehicle you are currently inhabiting. The Abraxas stones serve as a reminder that the physical form is a mix of the terrestrial, serpent, and the solar, rooster, a hybrid trap designed to keep the consciousness confused and occupied with the passage of time. But these stones were only the static maps of the territory. The actual operation of the trap is dynamic. It involves a process that occurs before birth and after death, a bureaucratic procedure of the soul known as the descent through the spheres. The Gnostic texts describe the journey of the soul into the material world not as a birth, but as a hostile processing procedure. This mechanism is known as the descent through the spheres. According to the ancient cosmology, the Earth is surrounded by 7 concentric rings, planetary barriers that correspond to the visible celestial bodies: the Moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. These are not merely astronomical objects, they are the checkpoints of the Ing Demiurge Yaldabaoth Thoth's prison complex. As the soul descends from the pleroma, it must pass through each of these spheres, and at each gate, it is forced to accept a gift from the resident archon. These gifts are euphemisms for shackles. In Gnostic terminology, they are often called garments or vestments. As the pure, naked light of the spirit passes through the sphere of Saturn, it is clothed with the garment of sloth and melancholy. At the sphere of Mars, it receives the garment of wrath and aggression. Venus imposes lust. Jupiter imposes the desire for domination. By the time the soul reaches the earth, it is no longer a free spark of the divine. It is weighed down by 7 heavy layers of artificial vices. This is the personality, or the ego. It is a foreign operating system installed over the original hardware of the spirit to ensure it remains compliant with the laws of matter. This ritual mechanism explains the inherent duality of human nature. We are not sinful by origin, we are infected by design. These 7 deadly sins are not moral failings of the individual, but the default programming code of the biological suit we are forced to wear. The Archons designed these emotional triggers to keep the soul reactive, confused, and anchored to the physical realm. The heavier the garment, the harder it is for the soul to remember its origin in the pleroma. This is the spiritual gravity that keeps us recycling through incarnations. We are too heavy to ascend. The terrifying implication of this mechanics is that what we consider ourselves, our likes, our dislikes, our temperaments, may actually be the archontic software running the simulation. The I that desires, hates, and fears is the mask provided by the wardens. The true self, the divine spark, is buried beneath these layers, silenced by the constant noise of the planetary programming. The ancient ritual of ascent described in the texts was essentially a hacking process, a way to identify these layers and strip them off one by one, handing the garments back to the Archons at each checkpoint to regain spiritual nudity and freedom. However, this system requires energy to maintain. The Archons are not self-sustaining. They are cut off from the source. They are entropic entities that require a constant fuel supply to keep the planetary spheres rotating and the simulation rendering. The programming of the human ego is not just for control, it is for extraction. We are not just prisoners, we are the livestock in a metaphysical farm. This concept of energy extraction was considered a fringe yet mystical idea for centuries, relegated to the dusty shelves of theology. But in the late 20th century, this exact mechanism was visualized for a mass audience in a piece of cinema that most people assumed was science fiction. The parallels are not coincidental. They are a direct plagiarism of the Gnostic nightmare. In 1999, the Wachowskis released a film that would define a generation. But The Matrix was not merely a cyberpunk action flick, it was a high-budget, unintentional documentary of Gnostic theology. While film students often point to Jean Baudrillard's Simulacra and Simulation as the primary influence, the book is even visible in Neo's apartment, the narrative structure is lifted directly from the prison planet theory, hidden in the red jar of Nag Hammadi. The parallels are so precise that they function as a modern retelling of the hypostasis of the Archons. The film's central premise, that humanity is trapped in a simulated reality to serve as an energy source for a higher, predatory intelligence, is the exact accusation the Gnostics leveled against the rulers of the cosmos 2,000 years ago. The most chilling scene in the movie is the revelation of the fields, where humans are grown in pods to power the machines. Morpheus holds up a Duracell battery, reducing the sum of human existence to a disposable power unit. From a thermodynamic standpoint, this makes little sense. Humans consume more energy than they produce electrically. However, from a Gnostic metaphysical perspective, it is terrifyingly accurate. The Gnostics asserted that the archons, being cut off from the eternal pleroma, lack a source of infinite life. They are parasitic entities that must consume the dews or light of the human spirit to survive. This validates the simulation theory evidence found in ancient lore. The purpose of the simulation is not just control, but extraction. The archons engineer a reality filled with pain, fear, lust, and conflict, because these high-intensity emotional states generate the specific vibrational energy they feed upon. The garments of the soul discussed in the previous topic are the extraction valves. When we feel the wrath of Mars or the lust of Venus, we are generating louche, a modern term for the spiritual food of the demiurge. The Matrix is not a playground, it is a farm, and the suffering of humanity is the harvest. The character of Agent Smith serves as the perfect digital avatar of an archon. He is the enforcer of the demiurge's code, disgusted by the smell of humanity, yet inextricably bound to it. He can bend the laws of the simulation because he is part of the operating system, just as the archons can manipulate the laws of physics to produce miracles or catastrophes. His job is to crush any anomaly, any Neo, who begins to remember their pre-material origin. The movie depicts the agents possessing ordinary people to stop the protagonist. This mirrors the Gnostic concept of archontic influence, where the rulers can hijack the mind of the unawakened to attack the awakened. However, the film diverges from the ancient texts in one crucial way. In the movie, Zion and the scorched earth are the Phaios real world. Gnosticism is far more radical. It suggests that the physical universe itself, the stars, the galaxies, the dirt under your fingernails, is the matrix. There is no real world made of matter. Matter is the illusion. The desert of the real is actually the pleroma, a state of pure light and consciousness that exists outside the coordinates of space and time entirely. The movie offered a physical escape. The texts offer a transcendental one. The cultural impact of The Matrix was a mass initiation. It planted a seed of doubt in the collective consciousness, popularized the term red pill, and prepared the modern mind for the possibility that reality is a construct. It moved the Gnostic heresy from the shadows of theology to the forefront of pop culture. But while the movie relies on CGI to visualize the code, the hard sciences are beginning to find something arguably more disturbing. We are no longer dealing with metaphors or movies. Theoretical physicists, probing the fundamental mathematics of the universe, have stumbled upon anomalies that should not exist in a natural, organic reality. Deep within the equations of string theory, they have found something that looks suspiciously like computer code. The bridge between ancient mysticism and modern science was built in a theoretical physics laboratory, not a temple. For decades, the Gnostic assertion that reality is a copy was dismissed as poetic metaphor. However, the work of Dr. S. James Gates, Jr., a distinguished theoretical physicist known for his work on supersymmetry and string theory, has provided a piece of evidence that is difficult to dismiss. While analyzing the fundamental equations of Adinkras, graphical representations of supersymmetric algebras, Dr. Gates discovered something that should not exist in a natural biological universe. Buried deep within the fabric of reality's math, he found computer code. Specifically, he identified doubly even self-dual linear binary error-correcting block codes. These are not random strings of numbers. They are a specific type of code used by Claude Shannon in the 1940s, the father of information theory. We use these exact codes today in web browsers and streaming services to remove static and ensure data integrity during transmission. Their function is to detect glitches in a digital signal and patch them in real time to prevent the image from corrupting. The implications of this discovery are staggering. Simulation theory evidence is no longer just philosophical conjecture, it is mathematical observation. In a purely organic universe governed by cause and effect, there is no need for error correction because there is no data transmission. Nature just is. The presence of this code implies that the laws of physics, gravity, electromagnetism, the weak and strong nuclear forces, are not fundamental truths, but programmed parameters. They are part of a synthetic signal that is being broadcast and maintained. This aligns with terrifying precision to the Gnostic worldview. The Gnostics claimed that the material world was a flawed copy of the Pleroma, created by an incompetent architect, the Demiurge. A flawed copy requires maintenance. A system built on unstable foundations needs constant error correction to prevent it from collapsing back into chaos. The block codes found by Dr. Gates may well be the fingerprints of the Archons, the maintenance patches applied to the simulation to keep the illusion of solidity consistent. This discovery suggests that what we perceive as the laws of nature are merely the source code of the prison. The recurring patterns, the Fibonacci sequences, the golden ratio, these are the rendering algorithms of the matrix. We are living inside a browser window that is constantly refreshing, and the physics we study is simply the act of reverse engineering the operating system. We are characters in a video game discovering the pixel grid. If the universe is digital at its core, then the materialist worldview is dead. Matter is not the base reality. Information is. We are information complexes processing a data stream. This leads to the most dangerous realization of all. If the world is a code, it can be hacked. If the reality we see is a projection, it can be turned off. The ancient Gnostics understood this hack not as technology, but as a state of being. They drew a sharp, unforgiving line between blind belief in the simulation and the direct knowledge required to crash it. This brings us to the final, critical distinction that the Church tried to burn out of history, the difference between being a believer and being a knower. The ultimate safeguard of the Matrix is not the police state or the laws of physics, but the structure of organized belief. The Gnostics drew a violent distinction between pistis kansi faith and gnosis kansi knowledge. In the context of the Nag Hammadi library explained, pistis is considered a counterfeit currency. It is the act of accepting the reality presented to you by authority figures, be they priests, politicians, or scientists, without verification. Faith is the surrender of the mind to the Archons. It is the mechanism by which the prisoner falls in love with the warden, trusting that the divine plan of the Demiurge is for their benefit rather than their digestion. This is why the Gnostics were reviled as heretics. They argued that the God worshipped by the masses, the God of commandments, jealousy, and tribal warfare, was actually the Demiurge Yaldabaoth in disguise. To have faith in this entity was to consent to one's own enslavement. Religion, in this view, is the control system designed to keep the divine spark docile. It promises a reward after death to keep you compliant during life. It externalizes salvation, placing it in the hands of a savior or a deity, thereby disempowering the individual spirit. Gnosis, conversely, is the internal realization of truth. It is not intellectual accumulation. It is a shock to the system. It is the moment the sleeper wakes up in the pod. Gnosis is the direct, experiential knowledge that you are not your body, you are not your history, and you do not belong to this world. It is the recognition that the architects are incapable of true creation. They possess no creative spark. They can only clone, distort, and invert what already exists. This is why the world is filled with fractals and repetitions. It is a copy of a copy, degrading with each iteration. The Archons fear Gnosis because it breaks the contract. A soul that knows its origin cannot be tricked by the tunnel of light or the karmic guilt trips of the afterlife review. The system relies on your ignorance to function. The moment you realize that the beings judging you are lesser than you, that they are soulless administrators while you are a carrier of the eternal monad, their authority dissolves. This changes the definition of sin. Sin is not disobeying a moral law. Sin is forgetfulness. It is the state of spiritual amnesia where you identify with the avatar on the screen rather than the player holding the controller. The entire machinery of society, from entertainment to education, is designed to reinforce this amnesia, to keep you focused on the shadows on the cave wall so you never turn around to see the fire. But realizing the trap is only the first step. If Gnosis is the weapon, then the escape route is the strategy. We must now look at the final operational directive left by the ancient seers, the method of anamnesis, or unforgetting, which serves as the only exit door out of the simulation. If the prison is mental, the escape cannot be physical. The Gnostics were adamant that no amount of space travel or technological advancement could liberate humanity from the we-prison planet theory framework. You cannot blast your way out of a simulation using rockets built from the simulation's code. The only viable exit strategy is a process called anamnesis. In Greek philosophy, this translates to recollection or unforgetting. It is the precise reversal of the amnesia induced by the cup of Lethe, the mythical waters of forgetfulness that souls are said to drink before reincarnation. To escape, one must remember the specific coordinates of their pre-material existence. The texts of the Nag Hammadi library describe the awakened soul as Allogene, skies, or the stranger. This is a crucial designation. It validates the profound sense of alienation felt by those who question reality. In the Gnostic view, if you feel at home in this world, if the politics, the entertainment, and the social climbing satisfy you, you are truly lost. You are asleep. But if you feel like a foreigner, like a traveler stranded in a hostile land with customs you do not understand, this is not a symptom of depression. It is the first symptom of anamnesis. It is the signal that the divine spark is rejecting the host tissue of the matrix. The great escape, described in the Gospel of Truth, is an internal collapse of the illusion. It teaches that the Archons and the Bati Demiurge Yaldabaothwa only have power over their own creation, the physical body and the counterfeit spirit, the ego. They have zero jurisdiction over the divine spark. The moment the soul identifies with the spark instead of the body, the Archons become powerless. They are exposed as mere holograms, scary masks trying to intimidate a being of infinite light. The exit door is not a location, it is a frequency shift. It is the realization that the warden is a figment of the prisoner's imagination. This leads to the practical application of the Akshkut passwords mentioned in Gnostic rituals. The soul, upon death, ascends back through the 7 spheres. At each gate, the Archon demands their toll, the return of the garment or vice associated with that planet. The unawakened soul, clinging to its ego and earthly attachments, cannot pay the toll and is knocked back down into the reincarnation cycle, the thermal exhaust of the battery. The Gnostic, however, willingly sheds these layers. I cast off wrath. I cast off envy. I cast off desire. By stripping away the personality, the soul becomes invisible to the Archons, passing through the net like water through a chain-link fence. The ultimate secret of the Gnostics is that the pleroma is not up there. It is in here, buried under the noise of the simulation. The kingdom of light is a state of consciousness that overlaps with the physical world, but is inaccessible to the frequency of matter. The return is a matter of tuning the receiver of the mind away from the broadcast signal of the demiurge and back to the static of the source. It requires a ruthless detachment from the drama of the world, a refusal to participate in the emotional energy harvesting that sustains the system. We are left with a terrifying but empowering conclusion. We are the sleeper agents of the divine. We were not sent here to fix the world. The world is a broken trap that cannot be fixed. We are here to remember that we are the rescue team for our own souls. The exit is open, but it requires the courage to walk away from everything the simulation offers, its pleasures as well as its pains. This is the forbidden history they tried to burn in Alexandria. This is the knowledge that turns a battery into a bomb. The jar has been opened, the code has been read, and the architects are watching. The only question remaining is, now that you have the map, do you have the will to leave the cell? So, where does this leave us? Standing on the edge of a vertigo that spans 2,000 years, the unease you feel right now, the quiet suspicion that reality is a stage set and the actors are wearing masks, is not paranoia. It is your spiritual immune system reacting to the parasite. The Gnostics didn't write these texts to comfort you. They wrote them to wake you up. And waking up is a violent, painful process. We are left with the heaviest question a human being can ask. Look in the mirror. Is the face staring back at you the I that you truly are? Or is it just the garment, the heavy biological wetsuit handed to you by the Archons to weigh you down? If the world is a prison designed by a blind god, then the only freedom is heresy. The simulation relies on your agreement to function. It needs you to believe that this is all there is. But now, you have seen the bars. Are you the battery that powers the machine? Or are you the glitch that will eventually crash it? The choice to forget is always available. You can return to the sleep of the material world, But if you want to keep pulling at the loose threads of reality, subscribe to the channel. We are continuing the investigation into the abyss, and there is much more to uncover in the dark.